What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Richardson, I'm your host. Joining me to talk about the NFL Combine, the one, the only, longtime friend of the pod, borderline super friend, Josh Edwards. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
You know what? I've been aspiring to be a super friend, so to be that much closer to that designation is.
I don't know what the actual like.
There's not like a quota, like a certain number of appearances before you become a super friend.
I mean, I think you are I mean, you're like, so like, we always say like friend of the pod, right? Where, and like, but like, you're not you're more than a friend of the pod. So like, I don't know. I need to work on the classification. I haven't done a very good job of it. I do like that Billy has snuck a little monocle into the title. Love a good monocle emoji. What's your favorite emoji, Josh?
So this might be bad to admit. I'm not a big emoji guy. I would say
I love emojis.
I would say the one, where you get the skeptical look, like your eyebrows a little raised. That's probably the one that I use the most.
You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious?
I do actually find it suspicious. Actually, no, I don't find it suspicious that Josh is not a big emoji guy. I could see you. I mean, if you're a straightforward man of I mean, like I'm the idiot who loves to use emojis. The best is like with Ryan Wilson when he's like he'll be like eyes emoji. It's like that's not how that works. Like you just do the eyes, bro. All right. Anyway, I was trying to explain to somebody over the weekend how like this actually I think they told this story several times, but it's like sometimes they're like asking me like what the pod is about, and it's like, well, usually football, but occasionally we'll talk about like Casey Potato Girl, or I'll go on an emoji. I'll talk about emojis.
So some of those Brady Quinn football shows really toe the line between football show and.
I mean, were you? I can't remember. We did one. I don't think he said it on air, but maybe he did. Maybe it was like right off air. I can't remember. But he was like. He's like, so is this, he's like, this the least rambly of all the shows that you do versus like, it's worse than everybody else? I was like, no, you're by far the worst. Like, when I say worst, I mean just like most likely guest to like take me off into a space cadet tangent that like, yeah, that's right. Dom has it correct. It's football with a bit of snark and many tangents. Yes, it's snarky football coverage is what is the best way to describe it.
I mean, you gotta have fun with it, though. It's football. Like, this is a game. Football. People are supposed to enjoy it. You gotta have a little fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said from Jump Street, man, I was like, look, I'm going to be me, and I mean, you get to go with the bad. Sometimes the football coverage is okay, and sometimes there's plenty of snark. Hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to turn on alerts. You get notified when we go live. This is a good time of the year actually to have alerts on for this podcast because. And this is true. Like, this is not a humble brag. We are the originators of the emergency podcast. Many duplicators. Many have done it better, but we are the first. We're like the Slanket, the Snuggie. Or is it the Snuggie? Which one was first? Remember?
I think it was a Snuggie.
Yeah, nobody knows about the Slanket.
Could be wrong.
Everybody knows about the Snuggie. The Slanket was actually first.
Wow.
But the Slanket people were bad at marketing, and therefore the Snuggie eventually won out and took over and won the day. So it's not,
and that's why people subscribe.
Is it the okay? We're going to talk about the combine. The NFL Combine is upon us. I saw, and I don't know if you saw this or not, so I don't want to like spring it on you, but I mean, whatever. We're going to talk Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud. I think that Todd McShay was cited. I saw this on Twitter. It was like Todd McShay apparently was reporting that Bryce Young is going to measure. I almost said weigh in. You don't weigh in your height. It's gonna like measure it at like shorter than people thought. Let me ask you this, Josh, before we sort of get into that comparison. Should we care about Bryce Young's height? And I understand that like it's usually more like anomaly. But most of the time it is tall. The NFL likes tall quarterbacks. The NFL does not like short quarterbacks. Russell Wilson kind of changed that, but then. And like Baker Mayfield, went first overall, and Drew Brees obviously was the founder, or not, he's the forefather of all this. But like like how much does Bryce Young's height concern you when you analyze him as a prospect?
I'm less concerned about his height as I am his weight. And a lot of people think he's going to be closer to 200 pounds. But, it's always funny how we talk about the weights in February and then they don't play at those weights in the fall.
Oh, yeah.
That's always a
I'm
talking point. So, you want him to be closer to that 200-pound weight because we've seen some smaller quarterbacks in recent years, whether it was Kyler Murray, whether it was Jalen Hurts. Those guys have a little bit of a thicker, lower body build, which allows them to sustain contact, drive their legs, under contact, all that kind of stuff. Bryce Young doesn't really have that extra power to him. You worry about his durability a little bit. But, yeah, I think he's going to come in a little bit on the shorter side. And when you look at that, you kind of have to project what kind of an offense that best fits into because you don't want to make him this traditional pocket passer, allow him to sit back there. Ideally you would, but most teams don't have the offensive line to do that. So in an ideal world, you see him landing in this offensive scheme where you can roll him out of the pocket a little bit, allow him to make plays off platform, all of that kind of stuff, allow him to make his, just natural playmaking ability outside of the pocket. I think that's kind of the ideal situation for him. But I'm more worried about the weight than I am the height at this point.
Interesting. I mean, that's a very viable concern because, like, you talk about, you mentioned Jalen Hurts. I mean, I always reference this quote that I can't remember who it was, a scout or GM or what it was, to Ryan Wilson, said that he was the best running back in the Big 12 coming into the draft. And it wasn't an insult. It was like, this dude he's going to run you over. Like, and he got hurt, but he plows through people. Russell Wilson, smaller, but a thick frame. Like Russ is always, and actually got real thick last year. No, no judgment, obviously. I would never judge anybody for packing on LVs during the football season. But I mean, Russ avoids contact, but also if he has to take contact, he is built differently. Like Bryce Young, by the way, the McShay quote was, "If I'm a GM, I'm scared to death of drafting him. His real height is 5'10" and a half, according to McShay. Brady Quinn has said, and like, I mean, I don't want to over exaggerate what he pointed out, but Brady, like, I think and we're saying this as prospects, right? When I say this, not as like what we know now, I think he basically had him behind only Joe Burrow as like a prospect in terms of just a pure passer. He said, when I'm feeling down, I go watch Bryce Young tape. Like, I mean, so this is fascinating about this draft too. Are you willing to take a chance on a guy when we've seen repeatedly, smaller quarterbacks not necessarily work out at the next level? What do you think about him versus CJ Stroud when especially when you start talking about that top pick? And we'll get to, Levis and Richardson after that as well.
Yeah. What makes Young so special is, his leadership, his ability to make plays off platform, like I said, but he's really just an instinctual passer. He's got a great feel for the game. You see a lot of people compare him to a Steph Curry. And while that's obviously a cross-sport comparison, you kind of understand it a little bit because he does have this natural feel for the game. He plays within the rhythm of the game. He's capable of creating his own opportunities, all that kind of stuff. CJ Stroud,
By the way, so just sorry to interrupt. I mean, I'm terrible at interrupting, obviously, but like the throw that we're seeing on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, like this is a freaking dime. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it does look to me. This is like the Steph Curry style throw, where it's sort of you boot him out a little bit on the play action, and then you just put it deep, and it just flies out of his hand.
Exactly, and CJ Stroud has a little bit more of that prototypical size we talked about off the jump, but he doesn't want to be this off-platform, outside of the pocket type playmaker. He prefers to work in the pocket. And he's been very good at that, surgical down the field, attacking at all three levels of the field. But in the NFL today, the quarterbacks that are having success are the ones that are willing to use their legs, the ones that are willing to get outside of the pocket, can extend plays, find guys late in the play. And CJ Stroud didn't show that a whole lot during his collegiate career. The college football playoff was an obvious exception against a very good Georgia defense. But teams are going to want to dig in this week in Indianapolis and try to figure out if that's who he wants to be. Does he want to be more of a pocket passer, somebody that sits back in the pocket and, is just delivering with accuracy to all three levels of the field? Or is he open to being that player that works outside of structure? I think that's what teams are going to try to get some insight into.
Josh froze up a little bit there. I would also point out that while he waits for that to come back, that the quote from Todd McShay was via Albert Breer of SI.com. Also quoted Daniel Jeremiah, who said if Bryce Young was 6'3", 220, I would be talking about him like I talked about Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence. And then McShay's full quote was, I love Bryce Young. I really do. I know he's 195 pounds. A really good friend of mine who's a scout had him at 5'10" and a half. I mean, it's not very big. It's not very big. I met with him. I talked to him. He's special. He's different. He has the poise. I absolutely love Bryce Young. I would bet on him. In his next breath, McShay concedes, if I'm a GM, I'm scared to death of drafting him. So, I mean, that's kind of a bit like, I mean, it's a little bit juxtapositional or paradoxical or some other word like that. The Breer talk, because he does it is the MMQB column, and he basically is like talking to Jeremiah and McShay about these prospects and trying to figure out, what they bring to the table. I mean, this is probably, I don't know if this is like a bias thing for me, but I just cannot ever, like, I just have a thing against Ohio State quarterbacks. I don't know if it's because I got, dragged by Shelly Meyer on Twitter one time and I just don't like Ohio State, or if it's like actually a thing where, I think sometimes you see coming out of that system, you just don't see it translate to the NFL very often at all. Justin Fields, totally different animal, totally different beast. Like, I don't want to get into the whole Justin Fields thing because that didn't work out very well last week. People got mad about it. But his production was largely on the ground last year, and he broke out by running the football. And the Bears catered to his skill set, and that's great. That's what you want in an offense. You want Luke Getsy, the OC, to be, doing stuff that incorporates the best possible skill set, for Justin Fields type. But at the same time, it's not like Fields, just lit things up in the passing game. And I will concede that his offensive line was doo-doo, and his receivers not exactly great, particularly when Darnell Mooney went down. So it's certainly a fair, I'm sorry, I was sort of going on a diatribe about actually I was really filibustering about about Ohio State quarterbacks. So I waited for you to come back, because quite frankly, if you were like, tell me what you like about Will Levis, I wouldn't be ready to do that right now, and that's that's on me. But you know what it is with the draft, like you draft gurus like Ryan Wilson better know everything about Will Levis right now. I got a little wiggle room. Any other thoughts you want to add on Stroud or Young before we move on to the other guys?
No, I think that was pretty much it. And of course, the electricity just went out. That's the Midwest is going through some heavy wind right now, so I'm sure all the journalists descending upon Indianapolis this week are going to be met with some very harsh winds in what is already a very windy town. But yeah, I mean, we've pretty much got all of it across.
Stroud's a little bit Indy right now. Oh my goodness! Everybody stay safe.
Yeah, so I don't know how you follow that up.
Are you going to be in Indy?
Yeah, I'm gonna go up for a day. See some of the edge rushers and talk to some people, stuff like that. But
I don't have any plans to go. I should go. I missed that combine. Although I don't like that they changed the times of the workouts. Not that I'm a morning person. I'm not a morning person. I think everybody is fully aware of that. But I don't like are the quarterbacks still going to be throwing in primetime this year, or did they move it down to like 3:00? I thought I saw the schedule. It looks like a little different.
I think because it's on a Saturday, it kind of falls into the middle of the afternoon. But this is the first year that, media, or one of the first years, I can't remember if they did it last year or not, but one of the first years that media is allowed inside the stadium to watch the on-field drills. So that's also going to be a little bit of a different experience.
They used to do a thing where they would come around and like pick like 15 people and let them go. Right. I think I got picked one here. Felt very special. I think I actually may have turned it down and like, no, I don't feel like going. I have to sit here and do this interview. But because it used to be, and I don't want to complain about the combine and how they changed, because it's the combine. It is what it is. Like it's a literal like meat market where a bunch of dudes put on their underwear and and compete in like drills that ultimately don't matter for like what they're going to do later in life. But it just used to be where it was in the stadium and everybody was sort of in like the consent. I don't know, man. I mean, maybe I'm just an old jaded, like old. I
mean, it serves its purpose. Like it's a central location. Everybody talks about the medical.
Indy, personally, I think Indy's amazing.
I do too. It's a great city. Got some good breweries, which I'm sure you
Oh,
explored when you were in Indianapolis. But
how dare you?
yeah, it's a really good central site.
You know, my favorite part about Indianapolis, my favorite place in Indianapolis is, and like you can only go once per trip, really, because it's Nikki. Have you been to Nikki Blaine's? It's the underground cigar bar. Oh my god, it's so
Oh no,
amazing.
I haven't.
It's like this like dark red leather and Steely Dan's playing, and you're just everyone just chiefing cigars and drinking like bourbon and scotch, and you had just the time of your life. You can't talk the next day, and you have to throw away whatever coat or sweater you were wearing because it just like you can't put it back in your suitcase because I mean, you're just going to. It just reeks of cigars. I won't reveal the name of the person, but one time we went to Nikki Blaine's, and well, I'm not going to tell this story on the podcast. I'll get in trouble if I tell that one. I'll get somebody in trouble, maybe not me. So where do you what do you think about this? Anthony Richardson, I think my buddy Connor Allen, a friend of the pod too, I believe, is tweeted out that Anthony Richardson moved to 7-1 on FanDuel to go first overall. He was still like 30 or 50-1 in a bunch of other places. And these these NFL draft props and betting odds for these things are wildly variable, and they are almost inherently like reactive, not predictive. It's like so and so does a mock draft, so and so moves up. Daniel Jeremiah mentioned somebody, and then you see that prospect go flying up. What do you think about this Anthony Richardson hype? Because the dude is an electric athlete. Maybe not exactly a polished passer quite yet there, right?
That's absolutely right. I mean, we saw what his potential was in that first game against Utah. Obviously, a very big quarterback. He's got a cannon for an arm, plus mobility. All the stuff that it's a similar argument to Will Levis, but Anthony Richardson is a younger player. He's not as far along in his playing career. He's not as good at processing the field. There's a lot of stuff that's not natural to him at this point. Whereas a player like Bryce Young, all of the stuff that, the strengths for him are weaknesses for Anthony Richardson, and the strengths for Anthony Richardson are weaknesses for Bryce Young in a lot of ways. So
like if you could put Bryce Young's skill set into Anthony Richardson's body, you would have a generational prospect.
100%, 100%. So you're banking on the potential here, a guy that could be something down the road. In an ideal situation, he lands somewhere where they could afford to sit him for a year or two, allow him to learn, understand what he's seeing from defenses when he steps onto the field. Because once you're able to unlock that athleticism, you're talking about a really special talent that could be one of those franchise type players. He may not be the first quarterback taken in this draft, but neither was Josh Allen, neither was Patrick Mahomes, neither was Deshaun Watson, neither was Lamar Jackson. Everything that we project as knowing during the draft process is often wrong at the quarterback position. So for a player like Richardson, I understand why a team would take him in the top 10 with the idea that he could become one of those elite talents down the road.
It is actually pretty remarkable how terrible the entire world is evaluating quarterbacks and predicting who's going to be the best, who's going to make the best transition to the NFL. I mean, it's people call it an inexact science. I mean, that is wildly underselling it. It is. We are so bad at it, and it's not a. I mean, NFL teams are terrible at it. Everyone's terrible at it. It's pretty crazy.
I think you have to have a little bit of self-awareness too, where your roster is in the competition perspective, because if you're putting a quarterback back there that is maybe more of a traditional pocket passer and you have a terrible offensive line, that player is not going to be successful. You have to know what you have and what you're buying into, and hope that those two mesh, because we've seen some teams with some incredibly poor self-awareness the past couple of years. And the situation has to be ideal for a quarterback to step in and have success. You don't often see a player in their rookie season at the quarterback position being able to uplift an entire team.
Yeah.
I mean, Mahomes sat for an entire year before he took.
And he had an incredible roster around him too. Like they had a good offensive line and elite receivers with Tyree and Travis Kelce. To your point, the Josh Allen thing, or to your point about what's around them. When the Bills drafted Josh Allen, I always look at it as they did a good job of building an infrastructure and then placing Josh Allen in that, versus the Jets, who are like, we're just going to draft Sam Darnold and that's going to work out for us. You have to have the stuff around the quarterback. And for instance, the Bears trading Justin Fields, and just a hypothetical, and then taking Anthony Richardson would be insanity. Just if only because you're just getting young. I mean, and who knows which one of them will eventually be better. I mean, you would take Fields, I think, with the experience, obviously, but it's just you're just swapping out. You're swapping out like a apple for an orange, or maybe like a red apple for a green apple. I don't know. I lost it on the fruit metaphor there.
Right. The hypothetical that they could move on from Justin Fields and take Bryce Young, with Bryce Young being such an outlier in terms of his height and his weight, if that does not work out and then Justin Fields goes on and is successful somewhere else, I mean, that is a very difficult look for your organization. But
you get fired.
Back to the Bills, they had Brian Daboll too. It's not necessarily just the talent around that player on the roster, but the coaching matters. We've given a lot of credit to Brian Daboll for the work that he did with Josh Allen, but at the same time, we weren't necessarily sure how much, to put on Brian Daboll. But now that he's gone to New York, he's done, similar to a lesser extent things with Daniel Jones. You kind of understand that, this is a coach that knows what he's talking about. And Josh Allen ended up in an ideal situation, because the Josh Allen that we know today is not the Josh Allen that was coming out of Wyoming, 4 or 5 years ago.
Coaching matters. I mean, coaching matters a lot, and the pairing of the coach and the player matter a whole lot. All right, let's get to Max Duggar and Will Levis. Where do they slot on your quarterback ranking list? We should clarify. Like, you have Young 1, Stroud 2, and then
and then Levis, and then Richardson.
Okay, Levis. So let's talk to me about Will Levis, who is also going to be another fairly. I mean, I don't want to call him controversial, but he's definitely going to be a lightning rod.
Polarizing.
Polarizing. Thank you for being better at talking than me.
I've used it plenty. Believe me, I had that ready to go.
That's true. See, you can tell I'm rusty.
So,
I'm not even up to date on my draft lingo. Like my draft vocabulary isn't even there yet. I'm controversial, polarizing. Such a layup there. Good call.
I mean, you fit in generational a time or two, rare, all of those arm talents, words like that. Once you fit those into the general dialect, you're hitting on all cylinders there. But Will Levis was, kind of disappointing this season. But when you look at the situation, it's oddly similar to what Josh Allen had in his final year at Wyoming. You're talking about a player that has plus mobility, great size, elite arm strength, but the production was not there this year, at least for a player that you would expect to be taken inside of the top 10. So he had a new offensive coordinator. He had a new wide receiver. He lost 3 offensive linemen to the NFL. That's a lot of turnover, and that's what we saw from Josh Allen going from his junior to his senior year. And then you throw in a shoulder injury, which Josh Allen also dealt with during his senior season. So there's a lot of similarities there. I think he's a little bit farther ahead in his processing than Richardson is at this point. But Richardson is also, 2 years younger than Will Levis. So there's a little bit more time for him to grow and become, better in that regard. So Levis is a player that has all of the qualities that Anthony Richardson does. He's just a little bit older, and, he's a little bit farther along in his processing. I think that's kind of how I look at it right now, is I feel a little bit better with Levis in terms of his ability to read the field.
Any chance Levis ends up being the number 1 overall pick? I know a bunch of people who have been betting the crap out of that for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few teams that pick early that really like Will Levis. I don't know if he's their top quarterback, but I certainly know that they are very interested in his services. So I would not rule it out entirely, because he does have the size that you look for at the position. He's coming from a pro-style offense, so the transitional period that you would expect for most college players is not necessarily there for Will Levis. He's shown he's been able to pick up, bulk amounts of information in a short period of time, going from one offensive coordinator to the next, from his junior year to his senior year. So he has shown that he's going to be impressive in interviews. He's supposedly throwing in Indianapolis this week. And as long as he's doing that, I don't think that there's anything negative to come from that. I mean, he's an incredibly impressive thrower.
If you throw at a combine and it drops your stock, you're throwing against air. Like it's a big time red flag.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the argument. What can I do to hurt my stock here? Whereas I need to get the momentum building back in my favor. And I think that's kind of the idea here is let's create some buzz for Will Levis coming out of this week in Indianapolis.
Got it. All right, let's talk wide receivers. Quentin Johnson, TCU. Who shines more? Shine, that's really not a draft. Who's gonna is there a receiver out of this list that is going to light up the combine? I guess shine actually technically works. Jalen Hyatt, Quentin Johnson, Jackson Smith, or Jordan Addison?
Hyatt is going to run the fastest.
Were we just saying JSN, or what do we say? What do we call him? And there's some.
Well, you can call him JSN. I just call him Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Jackson Smith and Jigba. Okay.
Yeah. So I think Jalen Hyatt.
I thought there was like a nickname, and there's some receiver with a nickname, right? I thought it was a Ohio State guy. Maybe not.
I mean, I've definitely seen JSN. I don't know how prevalent that is, but it is certainly out there.
If I'm the one asking it, and it's not a thing, then it's probably not a thing.
I think Jalen Hyatt is going to be the fastest among these players. He's got essentially 1 year of production, kind of a go ball, just go get it type of player that we've seen at Tennessee this past year. But I think the most impressive player is going to be Quentin Johnston when you look at his size, his body build, and then what he is capable of running. We actually talked to him, on the With the First Pick podcast, got a little insight into his training and where he is at in the process. So he's feeling pretty good about it. I think he's going to run really fast. And when you look at his size and his frame, there's going to be a lot of buzz about him coming out of the draft process. If I had to, I think it's still plus money right now. I would feel very confident that he's probably trending towards the number one wide receiver when we come out of Indianapolis.
That's a good look. He should not be plus, but he should be like minus 150, I think, to be first. I love Quentin Johnson. And not that I watch every minute of every TCU game or anything, but to me, he just pops off the screen. And by the way, Josh mentioned With the First Pick podcast. That's with Ryan Wilson and Rick Spielman. Obviously, Josh is on there too. Make sure and check that out. It is, if you like draft content, it is legitimately elite. Like Wilson and Spielman do a really, really good job. It's annoying how good Ryan Wilson is at how professional Ryan Wilson is. And Rick Spielman dunks on him basically the entire time, which is just delightful. You can see Quentin Johnson here on the screen. Oh, is that him they highlighted? Yeah, deep ball specialist. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, underrated. Who are some underrated stars who could shine at the combine? We'll tell you next.
Let's go. You can feel the madness.
Okay, underrated stars. Give me some names of people to look for in Indianapolis when we were watching all the combine action on NFL Network, and I guess it's sometimes on ABC, which is crazy. It's like the Mean Girls quote. It's like, stop trying to make fetch happen. Like this is not. Stop trying to make. I mean, you don't make enough money already, NFL. You can't do we really need to broadcast the combine on over antenna airway? I mean, it's kind of crazy. Anyway, sorry. That's my most.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into a lot of tangents about the NFL combine and the viability of some of the drills that they rank, or that they run. But we're talking about explosive players here. Devin Achane, a running back, wide receiver from Texas A&M, does a little bit of everything. I think a lot of people are probably familiar with his name at this point in time just because of what he brings to the football field. But a really dynamic player, somebody that you can envision in, an Andy Reid style scheme, something that's going to allow him to be in jet motion, end arounds, that kind of stuff. Use his capabilities in space. But a couple of players I'm looking at the wide receiver position, Maryland's Jacob Copeland and Princeton's Andre Yoshivas. A couple of players that are going to run pretty fast. So those two players are not getting a lot of buzz right now, but a couple of guys that when you look at their size, when you look at their talents, their athleticism, what they bring to the football field, I think you could see a little bit more buzz surrounding those two players coming out of the draft. I don't see a similar build up around Yoshivas as we did Christian Watson a year ago, but you're talking about a bigger athlete that is going to run really fast this week in Indianapolis.
How would you classify, and I should have asked this off the top, but whatever. Is this draft class for you? It's like top heavy, because sometimes each year you can sort of get an idea whether, and I think that for whatever reason, like most draft classes these days feel deeper than they used to be, right? And I don't know if there's a proliferation of, different offenses across college football, or guys playing. There's just more schools being prominently involved, or like cover, like everyone covers all the, everyone covers all of these teams, right? We know all these prospects. It feels like so. How does this class for you stack up relative to recent years?
Everybody wants to know about the quarterbacks. The quarterback class this year is much better than it was a year ago. But I think when you look at the top of this draft class, the talent that is available makes me feel a lot more comfortable than the talent that was available at the top of last year's draft class. I think I like the overall depth of last year's class a little bit better. I'll probably have fewer, blue chip talents, first round grades in this class than I do in most years. But I think the opportunity to get, starting level players even into day 2 is kind of where the value is in this draft. Get those role players into day 3. I think that's where a lot of teams, if you make the right decisions, if you've done the research and you trust your scouting staff, could really exploit this draft class. But I think once you get beyond that first bucket of 6-7 players, at that point, you're getting into the ring of prospects that you really have concerns about whether they're going to translate naturally to the next level.
I dig it. What about the potential combine losers, as in guys who, like, because going in, it's like I mean, I don't know if Bryce Young has a lot to lose because he's just his height. You're going to get measured at some point. People can see how tall you are. People can tell how much you weigh, right? For Bryce, but is there anybody that stands out to you that maybe, whether because they don't do anything or because they won't perform well, that could see their stock drop in Indianapolis?
I'll say Notre Dame tight end Michael Mayer. I don't necessarily think he's going to drop per se, but I think you'll see his stock level out a little bit because he's not going to be the dynamic tester that we typically see from tight ends taken in the first round. And when you compare that to a player like Oregon State's Luke Musgrave or Utah's Dalton Kincaid, a couple of players that are expected to test a little bit better, that's where I think you kind of see this tight end class start to separate itself a little bit. So Mayer is a very consistent contributor, a player that you feel confident in his ability to not only block, but be a pass catcher, but you're not going to see the dynamic traits that you would typically see from a tight end that is taken in the first round.
Right. I dig it. Anything else to know about the combine of this class, or anybody that stands out? Just any sort of, when you go to the combine, when you're a draftnik, you have some guys that, you're sort of like, like anybody on your radar that you feel like warrants mentioning going into the combine.
I'm just curious what Bijan Robinson does, the running back from Texas, because I feel confident he's going to go in the first round. I think he is in that same tier of prospect as a player like Saquon Barkley. But going through these mock draft processes every single week, I struggle to find a team that just naturally makes sense for him. I mean, you can make arguments with Billy's Eagles. You can find an argument for the Ravens or the Chiefs or, whoever in the bottom half of the first round. But his talent suggests that he's going to go much earlier. So is there going to be a surprise team that is comfortable taking him in the top 10? Because Saquon was a top 10 pick. Ezekiel Elliott was a top 10 pick. Leonard Fournette. Like, those type of players do end up going in the top 10, even if we talk about in the media, the running back position being devalued. So I'm curious to see if any teams start to become associated with a running back, much like a couple of years ago, where we
with Najee Harris, where it's like,
exactly.
it was so obvious. I wouldn't put it in my mock draft. I was like, they can't do it. It's too obvious. They're not even like trying to pretend that they're not going to take Najee Harris, and then they obviously took Najee Harris.
Or is it a bit more of a surprise team like Travis Etienne? They had already gotten Trevor Lawrence at that point, but obviously adding his backfield mate from Clemson was something that was important for them. But at the time, they had James Robinson coming off a fantastic season, so you didn't necessarily associate the Jaguars as having a running back need. But we could see a surprise team. We could see something obvious like we did a couple of years ago with Pittsburgh.
Bijan is one of those dudes that, like, I don't know if it's best described as like, it doesn't give you butterflies, but he like makes your heart sing a little bit. Like you watch him and you're like, I mean, he's just special. So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all, especially if he blows the doors off of the combine and is just a freak athlete. You see a team we say every year, like, don't take running backs in the first round, and teams are like, we don't care. We're taking this guy's a stud. We're taking him in the first round. Does it work out long term? Usually not. Does it work out short term? Sometimes, very often not. Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire did not work out. However, I would not fault anybody for taking Bijan Robinson because the dude is a freaking stud. All right. We good? Anything else? Anything else? You be live from Indy on with the. Are you gonna be doing the with the first pick pod? What did I call it? I called it with the first take the other day, which is like one, like kind of amusing, and like two, probably a copyright violation of some sort. Although that may be intellectual property. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a former notary, Josh.
I would say I would definitely be interested to tune into with the first pick this week, just because Rick does have so many connections across the NFL. Like if he starts hearing some of the buzz that is, going around to Indianapolis, how much of that makes its way to the podcast. So I would definitely be tuning in for that.
All right. Check it out. With the first pick, I laugh every time we think about with the first take. With Ryan Wilson, Rick Spielman, Josh Edwards. Josh, as always, buddy, it was a pleasure talking to you. I'm sure we'll catch up soon since it's #draft season. For Josh, I'm Brinson. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. See you guys later.